So I was talking about this with a friend and he said, what is the point of, if you're having a digital test, it seems like the thing that you should be able to do is take it at home on your laptop, right? But if you have to go someplace and take it on their laptop, then you might as well take a paper test if your reading comprehension and your ability to do math is gonna be lower. Why would you handicap kids and make them do this in a place that isn't an optimal environment? The idea of digital would be inside a more optimized environment. Hey, I'm Alyssa the College Expert. Today I want to talk to you about the article that came out from the New Yorker about the new digital SAT and its genesis. Before I begin, please hit subscribe and hit the notification bell to turn on notifications. So if you're like me, when the New Yorker publishes an article about the SAT, you're like all over it, right? I read this article, How the Pandemic Remade the SAT, and really what it's about is their move towards a new digital SAT. So they've talked at the beginning about how the College Board announced they were going to have a digital SAT in December 2020, and then they walked away from it. And that was in large part because of the huge AP test snafu. They did an online AP test, and a lot of people's computers crashed, their results weren't saved, and so basically they had taken this big test and they got no score out of it. I don't know what actually happened to those students. That would be a really interesting research project. But anyway, the College Board got a lot of flack for that. Now they have been talking about creating a digital SAT, and that's supposed to be rolled out in 2024, which is 2 years from now. So a couple things that I'm worried about the digital SAT. One, reading online, right? We know that reading comprehension is significantly lower on a screen than it is on a piece of paper. That's a problem. My kids already don't have great reading comprehension, so you're gonna put another barrier in front of them? That's a problem. Math, if you're doing it online, they're like, oh, we're giving them a calculator. I'm like, my students already, they take their calculator, they punch a bunch of numbers in, and then they're like, is this the answer? And if you were like, what's 11 times 45? They're like, 3. And you're like, could 11 times 45 be 3? And they're like, that's what my calculator says. Because they don't have a true understanding of what we call number sense, understanding of like what that answer to that number should be, that 45 times 11 is pretty close to 45 times 10, which is 450. It's got to be more than that. So it's going to be a 3-digit number, not a 1-digit number, right? Which is the thing that most of us do in our heads and just know that the answer can't be 3. I'm worried about giving kids a thing that doesn't force them to use scrap paper. At least if you give them a paper test and a pencil, they are going to write something down. And what we find with the kids that we work with is that the more they write down, the more their scores go up. And so we know that writing things down is the key to making scores move. We also know that marking things up, especially for students who are struggling with lower levels of literacy than they perhaps should be at the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade levels, we find that marking up the page when they're reading, marking up the excerpt, really makes a dramatic impact in their score increase. So the fact that my kids can't do the things that help them the most, that's a real scary thing. Another thing is that the test is going to be like the GRE, where if you don't get a high enough score on the first passage, you can't get to the harder second passage. It's adaptive. So that means that, let's say that the threshold for getting to the hard second passage is a 10 on the first passage. Let's say I get a 9. I cannot get the hard second passage, which means there's no access to the higher score area. One thing they talked about in the New Yorker article is that you read a lot of passages and you answer one question about them. I don't know that that makes life any easier, because that one question could either be about a really small detail or it could be about a main idea. And if you didn't really understand the thing you were reading, both of those could be incredibly hard. So I'm continuing to scroll through the article. So we talked about test optional. And of course, the College Board is not comfortable saying how they feel about the test optional movement, which makes sense. So this guy, this New Yorker article author, took the new SAT and was like, oh yeah, it's much easier. Yeah, of course it's easier. It's shorter. And it's on a computer, so you probably don't feel the weightiness of the test as much. Like there's a weight on your head. But should you feel like there's a weight on your head? Probably. The test means a lot. And what we find is that when kids take the test, the knowledge that this counts makes them do better. So there's a bump that comes of knowing that this really counts. There's also test anxiety that comes up when they know this really counts. But kids generally do better knowing that it counts than they are taken down by test anxiety, which is why we find that there's usually a bump when they take the actual test versus the practice test that they've taken with us. We know all of these things, right? But so we're taking away the supports that our students have and need currently. We're giving them a medium in which we know their comprehension is lower. And so the College Board employee, according to this article, said that the new test maintains the same level of complexity, same number of students are getting the questions right and wrong, which changes the perception of the passages being accessible. So they're using passages from a lot of diverse voices, which is great. If you were to look at the current SAT, they are also using passages from a lot of diverse voices. From my perspective, this reshaping of the digital SAT is more about shaping people's perceptions of what's happening than actually making a sea change. Because as a person who has studied the SAT for now 16 years, I know for a fact what is being tested on it, how diverse the voices are. I mean, I can tell you what is likely to show up on a passage, what kinds of questions, what kind of passages, who the authors are, subject material, etc. So it seems to me that this is more about an optics realignment than anything else, which makes sense. Does it really help our students? Probably not. And so I think I'm really worried about the digital SAT. I would like to see samples beforehand so that I know what are the problems going to be and how can I sort of get ready for those problems, sort of like a boxer figuring out where the next punch is going to come from. I would like to understand how students are doing on it relative to how they were doing on the old test and where are people getting things right and wrong differently. Because our concept indexing system takes every concept that's ever been tested on any version of the SAT that's been released, and some that we've gotten in ways that I don't wish to talk about, but figures out exactly what's being tested, how often, and in what other context, in conjunction with what other concepts, etc. So if we don't have a sense of what concepts kids are getting wrong and the ways that they're getting them wrong, then this test becomes a black box that it's a lot harder for our students to figure out how to succeed on. And so you might be thinking, oh, Alyssa, what you're saying is you can't game the test. World's smallest violin. You shouldn't be gaming the test. Well, students from underserved schools are not going to do well if they're not given some support. And I know that high-income parents are going to be able to find tutors who are going to be able to figure out how to game this test. So if that's the case, then I need to be able to game the test for my students too. And another thing to remember, it's not actually gaming the test if you're giving them a concrete skill that is useful to them. So if you're thinking about higher order thinking skills and you're like, oh, the ability to zoom out and have a holistic understanding of what's being discussed in this article, yeah, that's gaming the test. But that's also a critical thinking skill that you actually should have. So if the test is testing things that you actually should have in order to graduate from high school, I think that's okay. Maybe we need to reevaluate when we say teaching to the test, what that actually means. Because if the test is testing things that are useful and are important, and our approach of teaching those particular concepts is helping our students think in ways that we know are positive predictors of success, graduation from high school, graduation from college, salary after college graduation, and happiness in life. If we know that in order to get kids ready for the SAT, we make them better at things that are positive predictors for all of these other things, is that really bad? I don't think so. So I think we need to reevaluate what is actually going on when we're gaming the test, cracking it, and drawing straight lines between higher order thinking skills and the things that we're prepping our kids to do. So if I can't do that for my kids, then I'm really worried about this new test. That's my kind of 2 cents takeaway. I would say if you're worried about it for yourself, your best bet is to read some articles online and ask yourself questions about what you read and go back and figure out if you were correct. And if you weren't correct, figure out why. Is it because your eyeballs skipped a couple of lines? Is it because when you read online, you only look at the first and last sentence and you don't really look at the middle section? Is it that you just don't remember things, like you kind of take them in, but it's sort of like a candy bar, it doesn't have any nutritional value on the other end? So if you can figure out why that's happening for you, that will help you increase your comprehension on the reading section of the SAT. Tip a day. Thank you for watching. I'm Alyssa the College Expert, coming to you from Socratic Summer Academy and the Yleana Leadership Foundation. For more information about decreasing the opportunity gap and the racial wealth gap, and how we're quadrupling college graduation for our students, go to Yleana.org. For more college tips, check out the SocraticSummerAcademy.com blog, which is SocraticSummerAcademy.com/blog. See you soon.